Hello and welcome to Southeastern 16. Today we are going over regional projections, national seeding implications, all that fun stuff. I'll unveil our regional projections in just a moment. I'll tell you who is looking great to host, who's got work to do, how we put the bracket together, take your questions, your comments, all that good stuff. Thanks for joining us. I'm sorry, we did originally schedule this an hour ago. We had a scheduling conflict, just could not go on live at the time, but we are glad you were here. As always, we appreciate our audience. And again, leave your comments, your super chats, all those things. That helps us. Be sure to follow us on our social media platforms, Twitter, wherever you get your audio podcasts, all that stuff. And before we get started, a reminder, what makes this possible is memberships. We're going to do a members only segment this weekend. So membership is $3 a month. If you would please join, we would very much appreciate that. So keep that in mind. We will have some members only content this weekend, and sponsors help us too. I'll tell you who else helps us. Jay Greason, who made it just in time. Thank you, my man.
Hey, good to be here.
Good to be here as well. Before we get started, reminder, support the people who support our content. That is Cherubundi. They are back. If you don't use their product and you exercise, you should. They've got the cherry juice. They've got the cherry gummies. They got the cherry juice concentrate. What that does is that helps you recover from exercise, puts good stuff, antioxidants that your body needs back in your body. Anybody who is anybody in the world of sports uses Cherubundi. It supports your immunity. I'm talking Super Bowl champs, NCAA tournament teams, pretty much all the major sports programs and professional franchise use this stuff. It reduces soreness, increases recovery. Go to cherubundi.com. That is CHERIBUNDI.com. Use the promo code SE20. Get 20% off your entire order. You'll be glad you did. Jay Greason, welcome. We've got 2 weekends of college baseball to go. We have crunched the numbers. We have looked this from every angle possible. I've got my projections that we'll put on the screen. I know you got your own regional projections. We will go in and tell you who's on the bubble, who's got work to do, who might be in now but could fall out, all that stuff, who's basically locked to host, what the national seeding picture looks like. We got a lot to decide. We made a projection. I'll tell you one pivot I made this week. Given how unpredictable college baseball has been, I shifted more towards what have you banked rather than what do I think is going to happen. I'm not going to say I didn't consider that. I looked at series ahead. But what you're going to see on the screen may differ from what you're going to see other places, because I'm going probably 85% what have you done to date rather than try to guess what your resume is going to look like in a couple of weeks. And you'll see that reflected in the bracket.
And I think that is smart. And I think it's also something, just in sports in general, and I write a gambling column every afternoon here at timesfreepress.com in Chattanooga. You've got to go on what you know, as you got to lean on that. And I think the committee will. And honestly, I think we probably there's some wisdom in looking at your thoroughly researched field and even my top 16 as much on what we know as anything. And we got a great start to the chat. And Jackson, brother, hey, I'm going to show you my pullover. Do you see the logo? There's no way in hell Auburn's the number 1 overall seed, brother. I mean, hey, I get it. And hey, we all want our team to get as best a path as possible. And I got to tip the visor to Logan, who put in the chat that he's about to spend 7 hours in the DMV. Hey, if you haven't already gotten the real ID, friends, unless you've got an airline to catch between now and Friday, you may want to wait a minute.
Yeah, I've got to go through all that. My wife's done it, but I don't even want to think about that. You know what I do want to think about, Jay Greason? I'll give you one guess.
What's that?
Baseball. Let's think about baseball, and let's see our field of 64. Here's what we got. And I'm going to take the ticker off so we can see that. Here's what I got. And starting at the top, I've given Texas the #1 overall national seed. I still think the body of work has earned it. Working through the seeds nationally, I've got Georgia is the 2. Georgia is the #1 RPI team right now in the NCAA, working down the bracket. I snuck West Virginia in as a 16. The record is gaudy. The teams that West Virginia has beaten are not, but the overall record is still impressive. The metrics seem to indicate West Virginia is probably a bubble host. Coastal Carolina is a 15. I think Coastal is probably going to wind up hosting. I've got LSU at 8. I think the Tigers could move up, but have still got some work to do metric-wise. Florida State, my 7. Clemson, and by the way, the matchups. Okay, so Texas would be facing that regional winner would get West Virginia. Georgia and Coastal Carolina, those regional winners would get matched up. So moving down, I've got LSU paired with Clemson as the 8-9. Clemson has really taken it on the chin of late, but it got a really good resume. Florida State moved in the national seed last weekend, and I think it's got a good chance to stay there. I've got the Seminoles as a 7. I've got Tennessee as a 10. Tennessee is going to be one of the more variable teams in this conversation because of this coming schedule with Vanderbilt at home and also Arkansas on the road. I could see the Vols end up, acing the test the last 2 weeks, doing some work in Hoover, maybe even being a, 3, 4, 5 national seed. I could also see Tennessee, in a nightmare scenario, slipping out of the hosting conversation entirely or just sneaking in. Now, again, I've gone on body of work, and I think Tennessee right now is in that range, but the range for the Vols is pretty wide. What do you think about those, that top half of the bracket we've got here?
Well, I think a couple things. One, I have Arkansas over Texas because I think a sweep is an exclamation point. And I'm also worried. Do you remember a handful of years ago when Kenyon Martin got hurt with Cincinnati and they were the dominant basketball team in the country, and then the selection committee didn't give them, I don't even think they got a 1, and they fell off the 1 line because Kenyon Martin got hurt? You got to ask yourself, the loss of their Friday night starter and a sweep to Arkansas. I've got Arkansas 1 overall, and I've got Texas there at 2, but I'm just curious if you're right, the body of work, and I don't want to speak out of both sides of my mouth, but the body of work that Texas has put together is tremendous. And I think to touch on 2 points on the 1 through the interesting discussion about 1 all the way to the interesting discussion and the huge importance between 8 and 9, because then you get to host a super regional if you advance, makes honestly the next 13 days, if you go by UT, whether that's Texas or Tennessee, there's a whole lot of intrigue to be had over the next 12 days over a very long season.
Yeah, and that's why I would take right now, take a lot of this with a grain of salt, because a lot of teams can move up or down or in or out, whatever, in that hosting conversation. I'll get into some of the details of that later. But this is kind of where they are right now, and that speaks to the body of work that each team has secured. Like, I know Tennessee has really slumped lately, but man, the Vols, let me pull it up.
As you're pulling that up, Chris, a big picture conversation. I'm asking if the committee found some wisdom and included you, because you do as much. You could be like the Joe Lunardi of baseball brackets. If the committee included you, would you be more on the last month or the totality of the 4 months?
I would be more with the totality of the 4 months, because your schedule quality can vary very widely. Like, you could play, like Tennessee, for example. I was going to talk about the Vols in a minute. I may table some of this anyway. But, for example, when does Tennessee run into trouble? I mean, they've run into trouble playing LSU and Auburn, which are national seeds. It's funny how a slump can be caused by who's in the other dugout. And so I would say look at the body of work. Now, if you've got injuries or something like Texas has got, the makeup of your roster has changed. Let's say you got a star player back at the end of the season and then a hot spell corresponded, then absolutely you look at those things, but you make sure you take it into context. And that includes who you play and who's available.
And that makes a lot of sense, and it's one of the reasons why we're bullish on Texas A&M coming down the stretch. You get Sorrell back. The offenses started really clicking to a place that we expected when we thought this was going to be a juggernaut. The pitching's been unbelievably consistent, and I know I don't mean to skip ahead because that's now in the two line, but I completely agree, and I also think that works a little bit against Texas's favor, even though. If today was Selection Tuesday, I've got no beef with Texas being 1, but I personally have Arkansas as my 1 overall seed.
Yeah, and Arkansas could very easily get there. I just last week I said, okay, I'm going to try to project ahead and make guesses on what it's going to look like once teams do this or that. But then you have Auburn going into like Auburn has been out of the national seed conversation everywhere because people assumed they were going to go to Knoxville and lose. Guess what happened? They didn't. Right. So again, it's not totally something I ignore. I look at the weekends to go. I also look at the RPI needs report because if you can't get to a top 16, in the RPI needs report at Boyd's World, then it's going to be hard to host even if you do win out. But that's why I made the pivot.
The one thing I would quibble with, and I know the numbers bear it out, Chris, because I know you are a statistical wizard. Georgia at the 2 line is entirely too high for me. They are more battling between 6, 7, 8 than they are 1 and 2. And I just think that's because the road home splits are so drastically different.
Yeah, they are really hard to seed, but right now, Georgia is number 1 in the RPI. It is number 6 in KPI. Georgia is 12-9 in quad 1, 4-2 in quad 2, no losses in quad 3 or 4. And there's just not a lot to sink your teeth into. If people want to have Georgia as a quibble at 2, I understand it. I don't know that I'm right. But when you start looking at how much Georgia has banked and how you see Georgia lose a weekend and still stays at 1 on the RPI, that tells me a lot that Georgia has banked so much RPI work as I watch it from week to week. In fact, I'm going to go back and look at this if I can find it. Georgia's RPI numbers for the last few weekends. Goodness. Ending week 6, Georgia 4 in the RPI. And then here's what it was at the end of each successive week, starting with 7. 2, 3, 2, 1, 2, 1. Now, Georgia has lost a midweek in there to Clemson. Georgia has been swept at Texas. Georgia got swept at Vandy. Notice that RPI never left the top 4.
I also am.
And by the way, Jay, I'm not going to say that you're wrong about that. That's just my justification.
No. I'm just bringing up talking points that we can kind of verbalize through, especially for these SEC teams. And I know we can go line items in the chat. If you've got questions, please fire them away because I'm happy to give you opinion. And Chris is more than talented enough and researched enough to give you the facts. But we may have buried the lead because you have a record 14 SEC teams in this draw with the inclusion of Mississippi State after they swept Kentucky.
Yeah, and not just that, but look at the hosts. And by the way, the bottom half of the bracket, you've got, let's see, where did we leave off? North Carolina is the 5, paired with Oregon State, the 12. That one will be controversial, but the metrics for Oregon State, even though they don't always make sense to me as I look at them, they're going to go by RPI and KPI, and Oregon State's in pretty good shape there. On the other side, I've got Auburn paired with UCLA. UCLA moved into the bracket this week, and somebody is going to be a team out west that's going to host. I moved Irvine out of a hosting to a 2. They had a bad weekend, and I don't know that they can do enough to make up work in terms of RPI and KPI to get there to be a top 16. Now, the committee can put them in anyway, but again, I leaned body of work and metrics. At the bottom, You've got Vanderbilt paired with Alabama. If they both win, you'd have a rematch of that terrific series. And then you've got Arkansas and TCU, the 3-14 nationals there.
The other thing, and to go back to our Auburn fan in the chat who's now been cycled through off my screen, if you are, and I think you referenced this, if you're an Auburn fan and you get 6, and then if the seeds hold, you get to host UCLA, sign me up for that if I'm Butch Thompson. Give me that now.
Yeah. Auburn at home is pretty dangerous. Now, Dallas Baptist is no joke as a 2.
I
Heath's club has always got, but I mean, and look, nobody gets a cakewalk, right? For the most part. Anyway, your seeds in order, your national seeds in order: Arkansas, Texas, Florida State, LSU, Vandy, UNC, Georgia, and Auburn are your teams that host 2 weekends. 9-16, Clemson, Oregon, which is very interesting. Tennessee, Coastal Carolina, Irvine, Oklahoma, West Virginia, and UCLA. Now, I will. This is the rest of the discussion, and I think this is probably more important than what I've got on the screen, and that is who can still do what, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think right now you have 13 teams that I could see getting national seats, and they are your first 13. Okay. I think TCU, Coastal Carolina, West Virginia, Irvine, Ole Miss, Arizona, Dallas Baptist, Oregon, Oklahoma, NC State, Wake Forest, and Louisville could all host with the right combination of hot play down the stretch. I don't know that anybody can after that. Now, some of these it's going to take, like Louisville's probably going to have to win out, starting with Vanderbilt today. But it's kind of on the table for different reasons for all those teams. But I don't think any of those teams can get top 8 national seats.
I don't disagree with that. One of the reasons I seeded them accordingly is I tried to put my committee hat on and was maybe positioning somebody between 12 and 13 to where if all these seeds held in my top 16, there would be no SEC on SEC in super regionals.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if they take that in consideration or not. I do think they take matchups into consideration. And again, this week, your draw has multiple in-state, whether it's a 1 to a 4 seed or a 1 to a 2 like Georgia Tech. I do think the committee likes those matchups. And boy, oh boy, if I'm Florida, please send me to FSU's regional and let me take some hacks, because we've already taken 2 or 3 from the Seminoles during the year, and I'm happy to go there and roll the dice.
Yeah. I think the interesting Oregon is going to be really interesting because it swept Oregon State, which I've got. Right. I mean, not just a sweep; it was a 4-game sweep. Now, it was in Eugene, so there was that. But the metrics still haven't caught up. Oregon has got 10 losses in Quad 3 and 2 in Quad 4. The KPI is at 19, and I look at that RPI and KPI. Like if both those numbers are in the top 16, KPI is the strength of resume for college baseball. We don't talk about it enough, but I went heavily on those numbers rather than try to read minds, which created some stuff here. One of which is you've got Texas, Georgia, Arkansas, Vandy, your 4 top national seeds. Everybody's been trying to push Vanderbilt down, but the body of work is so strong. Vanderbilt is number 1 in KPI right now, which is strength of resume. You have to project that Vanderbilt is going to lose a lot of games to not at least host. Now, look, Vanderbilt has got to get to 16 wins in the conference. And once it does, and the series left are at Kentucky or at Tennessee and Kentucky at home, once it gets to 16, you can lock Vandy in as a host. I think if it goes 3-3, it's going to be a national seed because the metrics are so strong. But that might account for where I've got Vanderbilt and Auburn, which is probably going to be higher. And I haven't seen anybody else's, but I've seen both those teams as teams that people had hosting 1 weekend but not 2. Eventually, your body of work for both those teams is so strong. So we've got 5 of the top 6 that I have from SEC. Then you get to LSU, that's 6. Tennessee is 7, and Alabama is 8 in terms of hosts. Alabama's another interesting one, Jay. At Alabama's a 2 last week. Alabama lost the series at Vanderbilt. I think picked up a good midweek win. 14 in the RPI, 14 in the KPI. If I'm knocking Alabama out of my hosting field, that is just me projecting that somebody in the SEC is going to get discriminated against. That one may not hold, but metrically right now, Alabama absolutely deserves to host.
And to a growing chatter in the comments, West May and Blue 2017, guys, I firmly expect there to be SEC on SEC in the super regionals. I really do. And you can't plan that accordingly. I just was trying to put a spin on it that if all the 1 seeds advanced, could they match it up to where just your 1 seed on your 1 seed? If everything fell to expectation, could it possibly be something you didn't see? And I do think the committee takes into matchups, but I completely agree. There'll be several SEC on SEC super regionals, because if Chris hit 1,000% on this, I think at least 3 of the SEC 2 seeds advance. And then it's beyond your control. I mean, you can't.
Yeah.
I just was talking about 1 seed on 1 seed.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's I think I gave the teams that I think still have a chance to host. So we've still got 24 teams. Ole Miss would be the other. Ole Miss and Oklahoma would be the 2 SEC teams that still have. I mean, Florida, honestly, if like Florida ran the table, Florida would host too. So if you want to technically include Florida in there too, you could. Now, I don't think Florida is going to go run the table at Texas and Alabama. But that, mathematically, it's there.
The other thing, and Sam brings us up, and Sam, we always appreciate your time hanging out with us here on Southeastern 16. But the swing possibilities with the way Tennessee has played over the last 5 weekends, if Vandy comes in and takes 2 of 3, and then you've got the date with Arkansas, I mean, Tennessee's talking about a swing possibility of being a national seed or being the 2 seed nobody in the country wants to face.
Yeah. Now is the Boyd's world on them. 8 remaining regular season games. Tennessee has to win either 4 or 5, depending on who those are, to get a top 16 seed, which is not going to be easy when 6 of those games are Vanderbilt and at Arkansas. And if the Vols were to win 6 of those, they are a top 8 seed. And again, you get Hoover and what you do there, but I think the range of possibilities for Tennessee is very strong. The bad news is you got brutally tough schedule to go. The good news is because you have a brutally tough schedule to go, you win a bunch of those games, and the RPI is going to love that, and as is the KPI.
And I think you brought up something real interesting that Blake Willis in the chat just referenced about what teams can benefit the most from the SEC tournament. Blake, I don't know, with the exception of Missouri or South Carolina, which is the only way they're going to get in, I don't know if we can answer that, because the next 12 days are going to dictate which teams are desperate and which teams are comfortable. And Tennessee is truly on a hinge point in that regard.
Well, and let's work from the back end. We've talked about hosts and national seed. I'm going to shift the conversation to last in. These are the last teams I had in the field. I'm going to give you my last 8 or 10, and I'm going to work from the bottom up. I had Kansas State as the last team in, followed by Cincinnati. Mississippi State I had 3rd to last in. Western Kentucky I had 4th to last in. Virginia Tech 5th to last. Troy 6th to last. Xavier 7th to last, Kentucky 8th, followed by Arizona State and Southern Miss. So those were my last teams in the tournament. Now, you do not want to be on the last 2 or 3 lines, because I will give you some stuff to be careful to watch. A team like Southeastern Louisiana, which I think is in the Southland, if it wins that conference, I don't have them as at large worthy, although they're probably pretty close. If I were to look there, you got to watch for bid steals. So, like if Virginia were to win the ACC, which is very possible, those teams start getting picked off in that order. And I will also tell you here's the potholes. Okay, Mississippi State needs to get to, I think, 14 conference wins. The good news is you can beat Missouri 3 times and get there, or get close, and then take one against Ole Miss. I think you'd be pretty safe. Now, that's not going to do your RPI a lot of good, although it didn't really hurt Georgia last week, but Georgia banked a lot. So watch for that. State's trouble is State is 5-16 in quad 1 and is 4-2 in quad 3. But the KPI is 35. The RPI is 33. Both those have State squarely in that 3-2 range. I mean, they're not going to get a 2, but the point is metrically they're there. The problem for State is going to be non-conference strength of schedule is 200. If the committee is looking to pick nits with things, and this was a big separator I used. Actually, the next teams on my list, in no particular order, are probably Notre Dame, Iowa, Southeastern, Louisiana, and Virginia. Stanford with the toward close might have a shot too, but that's probably your working list. There may be some that I've overlooked. But when I was trying to make a decision between a bunch of teams that were close, I looked at non-conference strength of schedule because it tells you a lot about what a team tried to do with its schedule, and the committee will look at that, I believe. I discriminated when it was close accordingly. So Cincinnati, Kansas State got in by the skin of their teeth because they played strong non-conference strength of schedules. Cal Poly would probably be my first team out, but Cal Poly is 2-10 against quad 1, 1-2 against quad 2. That to me is not an NCAA tournament team.
No, it's not. And I think the phrase we need to adopt from now between the 26th of May, when this all of the projections become reality, is how you referenced it. All of this is picking nits. I mean, the divide between 1 and 5 and 6, very slight. The divide between 7 and 12, while forever important, also very slight. And then where you're going to the last couple 3 to get inside the top 16, also very slight. I'm curious, and we've had some folks in the chat, and we haven't spent a whole lot of time on it. I don't expect us to today either. And I'm not going to bash the fellow guys in what we do for a living. But some of these polls have been so,
oh my goodness,
just womp-sided and inexplicable to me. I'm curious. I'm not trying to disparage the committee. And I know I say that the same way I heckle Alfred about no offense, Missouri, and then it becomes something very offensive because they stink. But if I do not believe the baseball committee is as in tune with the baseball teams on these various tiers as maybe the basketball committee is, because national baseball, college baseball coverage doesn't get as much attention. But then you get some of these publications putting random polls out that have Arkansas 7th in a national poll after sweeping Texas. And again, I'm not mentioning names, but it doesn't take a whole lot of research to figure it out. Either those guys did that over beer pong, or they were just drawing names out of a hat. But I'm a little uneasy if that's going to backlash a little bit against some of where we think some of these SEC teams may land.
Well, and I'm not. Here's what you hear, okay? When you listen to, okay, here's how we put our poll together. It is, okay, did the team win its weekend series? And if so, it probably moves up or holds where it is. And if it lost, it probably moves down. And I get it. That is an easy way to do polls, because a lot of these people have other responsibilities. They have writing, they have podcasting. Putting together a ranking is just part of what they do. And so if you're looking for a shortcut, then you start looking at, okay, did they win their series or did they lose? And do they move up or down? Or did they beat this team or that team if it's close? And here's what is happening. Most teams that are playing 4 games a week, Jay, on the worst end of that, you ignore the outcome of 2 games, because there's a big difference between being swept but losing all 3 and losing 2, and it kind of gets lumped in as the same thing. And nobody looks at the midweeks in these polls. But let's say you win a series, you can be 2-2 for the week, but hey, you won the series. That's what carries the day. Or conversely, you can lose the series, but you win your midweek, especially if it's a good team, same record. It just gets processed differently. I don't like to do that. It's why I think the polls are completely out of whack. I get it. But I think what gets lost is, like, there's a difference between losing a series and losing it while being swept, which is like one place where Vanderbilt has benefited. Vanderbilt's only been swept once, and that's by Arkansas. But there's a lot of times they lost a series where they got a game 3 against an Oklahoma or an Ole Miss, and that's the stuff that gets lost in the polls, that in the midweek, and it shouldn't happen that way.
And I completely agree with you, because especially maybe not moving forward, but in the previous month or so, that midweek game, a 2-2 record, if you win the weekend series, we don't know what they're working on a Tuesday night against Directional State University. I mean, we don't know who's getting the ball in a leverage inning where he's just trying to find out if a freshman has matured to a place that he can trust him to get an out with guys on second and third and 1 out.
Right.
But I will say this. You referenced Louisville earlier. There are some leverage games in this midweek. Coastal Carolina playing Clemson tonight is a struggling Clemson team. And I know this is not ACC 16, but that game has my attention for sure.
Yeah. And speaking of which, here's some stuff that I would watch. I mean, in the SEC particularly. Georgia at Alabama this week is going to be big. Georgia's not played well on the road. If Alabama gets 2 or 3, Alabama has very much bolstered its case to get in the tournament as a host. So watch out for that one, because the RPI and the KPI are already there. Arkansas has got 2 huge series. Like, if Arkansas wins the series at LSU, which is at LSU, isn't it? Let me double check that. Yes. That's a big one. Arkansas could get to your 1 line with that, and also beating Tennessee in Fayetteville. Vanderbilt at Tennessee, Kentucky. Like, if Vanderbilt wins 4 of 6, Vandy's going to be a national seed. I don't know how you could keep them out. If it wins 3 of 6, it might. But it better get to 16 wins, because 15 and 15, even with the metrics, the committee has never liked that. So huge. Vanderbilt's banked maybe as much as anybody, but some variability because of that conference record, which they didn't get to play South Carolina, Missouri, which didn't help them there. Also didn't hurt their RPI either. ACC, North Carolina State, and then UNC goes to Florida State, which is going to be one of the bigger series of the year. Auburn's got, nothing's a layup, but Auburn's chances to get a national seed, they can get 3 wins against South Carolina this weekend. Auburn has banked a lot. Then your conference record gets to 16 wins. Auburn is hosting at that point. Slam dunk, will not matter what happens at Ole Miss. Ole Miss is in playing for national seeding there. Clemson's got Duke this weekend. That's a big one. Duke could really move up. Duke's on the border between a 2 and a 3. Clemson fell out of the national seed order, in my opinion, but could get it back. Oregon State's got an interesting series with Iowa coming up. I had Iowa out, but Iowa's like 20-4 in the Big Ten for whatever that's worth. Now, hasn't played anybody, but if you're looking at just conferences, I think the Big Ten is the number 4 RPI. And if Iowa wins that league, the metrics are awful, but that might win the day. And what else have we got? I think West Virginia, it plays at Kansas State, which is barely in by my estimation, and it plays Kansas. So those will be 2 of the only tough series West Virginia has had all year. I think that's going to make or break West Virginia as a host. Irvine could still get in there. Ole Miss, Mississippi State's going to be key for Ole Miss if it wants to host. And then that Auburn series. And Oregon. Oregon's got Washington and at Iowa. That's going to be a big series. Oklahoma, if it closes hot, at Kentucky, Texas. Yeah, I mean, there's more, but those are the ones that I've mostly got my eye on.
And Wes, I completely agree with you, brother. West Virginia does stink, and they've played a whole collection of nobody. But it is what it is, and they're going to hop around. I think West Virginia is somewhere between Mississippi State and South Carolina in the SEC conference rankings if they got to play that schedule. And I'm just being completely honest. But it is what it is, and they don't ever draw that corollary. I mean, what would Gonzaga be playing in the ACC back in the day? And we see Gonzaga getting a whole bunch of 1 seeds. And maybe that's not completely a fair comp because 1 or 2 stars, a Chet Holmgren or somebody like that, can greatly redirect a basketball program way more than a baseball program. But the numbers are easier to defend than what the eye test may tell you. And I don't think there's any doubt in my mind Mississippi State has more future pros on their baseball program than West Virginia does.
Yeah. Here's the other thing I'm worried about. I'm suddenly a little worried about Kentucky. I've got Kentucky in at this point. I probably went a little optimistic. I've got them a little higher on my seed list than the metrics would have them. Kentucky right now has got a 38 KPI and a 41 RPI, which would both put Kentucky in as a 3 seed at large. And I went with 2 really loud series wins at A&M and at Knoxville. I think if the committee looks into Kentucky's record, those are going to be pretty loud. The issues for Kentucky, 10-14 in the league, you need to get 3. Win 2 against Oklahoma and 1 at Vandy. I think Kentucky is safely in. But, you go 12-18 there. I don't think 12-18 has ever gotten in the tournament before from the SEC. It is an SEC like we've never seen. The needs report says Kentucky needs to win 3 of its final 7 to get a top 45 RPI and 5 of its final 7 to get a 32. So, again, I went by body of work. If I'd done a little bit more projection in it, I probably would have put Kentucky lower. But all of a sudden, Kentucky is in a little bit of danger, maybe a lot of danger, and that's something I didn't see coming a week ago.
Oh, I completely agree with that a week ago. And I'll even go you a step further because we spent a fair amount of time. You've got Texas as the one. I've got Arkansas as the one. But I still believe, big picture, the most impactful series could very well be Mississippi State sweeping Kentucky because now Mississippi State moves ahead of them in the bubble. And I think Kentucky's a tournament team. I'm not in a million years saying I don't believe they are. Somebody called them scrappy as hell in the chat, and I completely agree with that. And they're fundamentally sound, and they're fun to watch, and their uniforms, when they do them right, are tremendous. But if you get to Bubblicious time and you've got Mississippi and maybe not similar records, maybe not similar RPI, but Mississippi State swept Kentucky, you're going to have a hard time putting in the Wildcats over the Bulldogs, in my opinion, if you're just sitting in that room saying, okay, they played, and then we're going to do this.
Yeah, completely agree. I do. And here's another problem. 8-15 in quad 1, 1-1 in quad 2. So 9-6 and 2 losses in quad 3 and 2 in quad 4. Now, look, I think Kentucky's an NCAA tournament caliber team. I really do. Got a lot of faith in what Nick Mingione has done. But there are some big cracks that weren't there a week ago. We got to get out of here in a second. Let's do a minute or 2 of, I don't know, questions, comments, anything else to wrap it up.
I think I'm going to start this I'm going to finish this where I started last week. That first and foremost, our commenters are great, and
yes,
you guys, please consider subscribing, and it's $3 a month, and we're going to start incorporating some only subscriber stuff because that's how the business model works these days. But you guys are tremendous, and as soon as I figure out how to sign up, I'm going to get in the chat and join you guys because The back and forth is tremendous, and I really appreciate how respectful you guys are of each other, even though you all wear different colors. But the most important thing I will say is you can disagree with our takes, but you cannot disagree with how much research my man Chris Lee puts into this bracket right here, friends.
Yeah, my eyes were just about crossed when I got done with this. Sam has asked a couple times, so I'll address this on the way. What does Tennessee have to be top 16 and top 8? RPI-wise, Tennessee's got 8 games left. And again, the SEC tournament, it rolls over again, and you've got great RPI opportunities. But regular season, 4 to 5 of the final 8 need to be wins to be top 16, and 6 need to be there to be top 8. I forget who Tennessee's got in the midweek. You can get 2 bunnies there probably, which counts. And then you've got to, like, I think if Tennessee gets Vandy this weekend, well, I say they're in good shape. They got to go to Fayetteville, which really sucks for anybody right now to play baseball in. But, yeah, I think Tennessee's got a huge range of – now, if Tennessee goes on a heater and say they win 5 of 6, blow this thing up because they're a national seed.
Easily. And zooming up the boards because the body of their work is tremendous. And Kevin Spencer – glad to see your name in the chat. Thanks for subscribing, my friend. And even to be an Auburn graduate, I don't know anybody who's been a bigger believer of the Hogs all year than I have, because I think they are tremendous.
Hey, thank you, Nick. Sam, I am a bum. That's right. I'm not coming to Knoxville because I got family stuff all weekend. But Sam, you and I will meet up one day. Promise you that. Looking forward to it. All right, I've got a lunch appointment, so I need to go. You got stuff to do. But thank you all. Remember, please subscribe to the membership tier. It's $3 a month. You're going to be getting bonus content soon. ChairBundy.com, 20% off your order with the promo code SE20. And follow our social media accounts and our podcast audio feeds. Help us out there if you don't mind. Go to where you find our podcast audio feeds, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, those places. Subscribe, leave us a nice rating if you don't mind and some comments. Try to get those noticed a little bit more. Those are the things that help. So if you want to help the show, those are great. Love you guys. We've got a great audience. Here's one thing I like, Jay. We've got really intelligent people in the chat. This is not full of drive-by, assault on other people. It's good questions. It's good comments. It's respectful. And I think that says a lot about our audience, and we appreciate you, because we couldn't do this without you. Sven, thank you for the super chat. Sven, I'd push back on that a little bit. You guys hadn't caught a lot of breaks. Now, I get the schedule was easier, but you guys lost a lot of close games, and baseball, sometimes that's bad luck. I think you guys are in right now. I think you're good enough to be in. We will see how that finishes. All right. We are done.
Laundry matters. And I know, and laundry matters. And we've talked about it, and the name Mississippi State's going to carry weight in that selection committee room. There's no doubt about it. I mean, all right. One final question before we go. You got to get to lunch, and I got to get to middle school softball. If the decision comes between Kentucky and Mississippi State, and we were in the room this morning, you leave Kentucky out, right?
See, if it's a 1-to-1 comparison, then you do. If it's a one to others comparison, that's where things get really screwy.
Yeah.
Because what you're doing is you're comparing teams to the field. People forget that. If you've narrowed it to just those 2 teams, then yes. If that's not the case, then maybe not. And I gave this example earlier. Oregon beat Oregon State 4 times, but you're comparing these teams against the field. And Oregon's metrics are clearly better. And trust me, I've tried to do rankings that way where you say, well, this team beat that team. And then what happens is you end up elevating a team, several spots above. Because what I do is I compare line by line. I say, okay, I got this team at 30. Would I move them ahead of the team that's at 29? And I'd put them together that way. Once you start giving a team a head-to-head edge just based on that, you can end up with some really weird stuff.
Are we going again tomorrow, Chris? What's our next plan? Are we not reconvening until Thursday?
I think we are not going tomorrow. Well, I say that. We're going to be recording previews. I believe we're going to do a separate preview for Vandy, Tennessee. I believe we're going to do a separate one for Arkansas and LSU. So those should be standalone videos. I think the rest of the series we're going to put into one video like we've been doing all year. I think those will come out probably maybe Wednesday, certainly Thursday. Those will not be live. Our next live show, I believe, is going to be the Thursday night reaction, followed by Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We'll go live for all those. And then Monday, Power Rankings. But I don't think we're going to be live the next. Now, look, if we have a coaching change, which that was a hot topic yesterday in Columbia, that'll be the exception. But for now, I think our next live thing will be Thursday night.
All right, buddy. Tell them where they can find us.
Yeah, Southeastern 16 on all your podcast destinations. And here, of course, again, leave us a rating, a thumbs up. That helps us. Gotta run. Wish we had more time, but we don't. Thank you for watching and listening. For Jay Greason, I'm Chris Lee. God bless you. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you again soon with more baseball content and, of course, basketball content and football content. Always here at Southeastern 16.